Now more than ever, innovative technologies are fueling change and sparking new ways of thinking. Collaboration between corporations and startups is key to staying at the forefront of these trends. However, finding the right startups can be expensive, time-consuming, and ineffective. But Plug and Play is here to help. As a corporate partner, you will gain access to a whole ecosystem of innovation. Discover startups that meet your tech interests. Stay updated on the latest trends and network with industry peers. We will help you during every stage of your innovation journey, no matter where you are and where you want to go. Get in touch today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest monthly crypto roundup. I'm Patrick. I'll be your host today. We've got a very interesting company here with us that I'm very excited to share with you about. If you haven't heard about them already, then you're in the right place. You definitely need to learn. They're really changing the game when it comes to engaging with customers and allowing creators to engage and monetize their followers in a new and meaningful way. With rockstar investors like Mark Cuban and Gary Vee, this is going to be a very interesting discussion around how businesses should really start to think about how to utilize Web3 in order to keep themselves competitive and continue to make meaningful engagements. But before that, we'll go over the agenda a little bit. So we're going to have some opening remarks, and then we're going to have an overview by thirdWeb, followed by a panel discussion. So please feel free to ask any questions. You can either message them in the chat or Gina can bring you on stage, and then we'll wrap things up. And then before we dive in, we're going to have some housekeeping. We've all been doing this now for a few years on Zoom, so feel free to use the chat for general questions and comments as well. But please keep yourself muted if you're not currently speaking. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Krishang to go ahead and give you guys the overview of what thirdWeb does and how they're helping businesses like yours.
The two big questions are, what's Web3 and why does it matter? And what's thirdWeb and why does thirdWeb matter? A little background on me. I am Krishang. I'm the founding engineer of thirdWeb. I have a background in liberal arts, read a bunch of philosophy, and found my way to becoming a smart contract engineer. And next found my way into becoming the founding engineer of thirdWeb. Even before I can sort of describe what thirdWeb does, why I think what we're doing is important, I think it's necessary to sort of scope the conversation over what Web3 is and why Web3 matters in general. So that's what I'll tackle first in the talk. I have this little graphic that I made. Clearly, this is the slide that I created and not the lovely designers at our team. But I've laid out the transition from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3. These are not definitions. These are heuristics that I have for myself. So Web 1, the chat says you can't see my graphic. I hope you can see my screen right here. Web 1.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. The heuristic for Web 1 is somewhat static content. Users are largely consumers. They are going to pages with information and viewing them, consuming them. And data somewhat lives in siloed databases. Then you have Web 2. And the big shift from Web 1 to Web 2 is static content is no more. Now you have dynamic content. And the dynamic content is either coming from the publishers or the developers of these pieces of Web 2 themselves, or it's coming from the users. And that's the second big shift, which is user participation. And that's what I think Web 2 is really all about. You can think of Facebook. Users are posting things, commenting on things, generating a lot of content, and in general participating in the web. The key thing to assign to this user participation in Web 2 is that all of this is happening in siloed corporate-owned databases, right? So if you're on Facebook and you're having a conversation with your friend, that conversation lives in Facebook's database. So all of this user participation is now segmented into the various databases that are proprietary to the relevant corporate folks. The big transition to Web3, Web3 maintains the idea of dynamic content. It's very much focused on user participation. But the big shift is all of this user participation is now happening on global shared databases. What I'm calling global shared databases is just blockchains like Ethereum, blockchains like Polygon, just these blockchains, which are global shared databases with multiple nodes keeping up a network alive. Everyone can read the data on this blockchain. People can pay money to write data to this blockchain. In general, this was a bigger shift in the technical architecture of the web. The key innovation paired with things shifting to a global shared database is the private and public key cryptography tech at the foundation of it all. What that allows people to do is mark a piece of data as their own, and truly as their own, on this global and shared database. And this is what Web3 sort of enables. This is why Web3 matters. When you have a global shared database where each and every person can truly mark a piece of data as their own, users can now truly express consent. They can truly express preference. They can exercise their freedoms better than they could in Web 2, especially financial freedoms. And most importantly, Web 3 changes the social dynamic of the web. In Web 2, you had people architecting platforms that users can best serve. You can think of the matrix right there, where you have human batteries powering the machine. And that is the scenario you kind of want to avoid. What you want to happen is all of these great machines, these great technologies that we develop, we want them to power the users. We want them to power the people. And when you have a global shared database where users can mark a piece of data as truly their own, now databases are not proprietary in themselves. What that pushes people to do is architect platforms that best serves the users. That's the critical, perhaps, innovation of Web3. It's just changing the social dynamic of the web. And within this whole story of Web3, I kind of want to talk about now what's thirdWeb and why does it matter? When you have any budding industry, you have builders flock to that industry. As long as builders keep flocking to that industry, things will get built in that industry. And eventually people other than the builders would arrive wherever the builders are building things. A lot of usage of the word build and builders and building there, but that's the general gist. You need creators to create things for people to flock to that budding industry. And that's the place from which thirdWeb was sort of born. So what's thirdWeb? thirdWeb is everything between your product and the blockchain. The primary mission of thirdWeb is to make it easy to build Web3 apps. You have, for example, any sort of Web2 business or any budding startup idea that does not exist yet. Those ideas and those businesses have components that are somewhat independent of the blockchain itself. That's what I would call application logic or application-specific logic. Anything like Facebook has features like messaging, posting. These are things that conceptually do not require a blockchain. And so those are the kinds of things that are application-specific logic. thirdWeb's job is to handle all the implementation details that comes between you, your product, and getting your product to the blockchain. Why would you get that product to the blockchain? For all the reasons we mentioned previously. I see the chat says they can't see the graphic again. I guess my words will have to make up for it whenever you don't see the graphic.
It's back.
Awesome. So that's what thirdWeb is, everything between your product and the blockchain. And that's at the high level. In terms of the thirdWeb product itself, we offer all the key things that you require to get your product to the blockchain. And if you can see the graphic there are 3 of those things listed: smart contracts, SDKs, and a dashboard, a UI for all the things, all of what's happening with your smart contracts. And these are the kinds of things that thirdWeb offers. First off, smart contracts. This is the actual code that lives on the blockchain. If you want to engage with Web3 in any way that requires you to deploy code to the blockchain, thirdWeb can help that mission in 2 ways. We initially started off with offering pre-built contracts. These are sort of foundational contracts. We spend months over months scouring through the industry, looking at what are the common use cases that people are trying to implement. And we boil them down to perhaps 8 to 9 smart contracts that are repeatedly being published by different sets of people. These are NFTs, these are social tokens, currencies, marketplaces, revenue sharing contracts, and so on and so forth. So this is one set of offerings when it comes to smart contracts that thirdWeb has. The next set of offerings is pretty much infinite, which means we're trying to push out a developer tool that lets you publish your own custom smart contracts without all the security failings of the current Web3 development landscape. What does this mean at a high level? If you would like to move quickly and move fast, and you have basic requirements of what you'd like to do, and basic is not derogatory here, even the largest companies to the most smallest of creators sometimes have basic requirements. An NFT drop is a basic requirement. And in those terms, basic doesn't mean derogatory or isn't meant to be derogatory. But you'll always have little tweaks and customizations that you might want in the product that you're creating. And for those reasons, we give you a CLI tool to deploy your contracts and get all the offerings that you receive with pre-built contracts for your custom contracts. So that's our first offering. The next offering is SDKs. SDKs in languages like TypeScript and Go and Python, so basically any client or server-side language. These SDKs are meant to basically help you move very quickly through the setup process of even connecting your application, your product, your game to the blockchain in the first place. And then the SDK offers a pretty simple API to interact with your smart contracts, whether those are contracts that were one of our pre-built contracts or contracts that you deploy in a custom way. This is pretty much pushed out there with the purpose of just helping you move faster towards production. And that's the greatest theme we have when developing our product. Another piece is a dashboard, a UI for your smart contracts, just for you to be able to transparently see what's happening on your smart contract. And maybe you are conducting an NFT drop and you want analytics on the participants that have claimed your NFTs, secondary sales on the NFTs that you published, and so on and so forth. And the next part is admin controls. It's hard to phrase it, but on your smart contracts, you'll have certain people who have privileged access to perform certain actions on your smart contracts. And we try to develop these frameworks with professional engineering teams in mind, and maybe larger organizational structures in mind. You wouldn't want your average developer to be handling all of the finances related to your smart contracts, and vice versa. You don't need someone handling the finances of your smart contract to be minting NFTs on that contract as well. So we give you different tiers of roles that you can assign to different wallets who are meant to perform different sorts of actions. And lastly, if you aren't a technical person and you don't want to write a single line of code, all of what I described, deploying a smart contract, conducting an NFT drop, or any of those things, you can simply do it on our UI. So you don't need to have any crazy technical capabilities to achieve pretty powerful applications using thirdWeb. And the final piece is all the glue that holds all these things together. As I said, I was talking about blockchains as global shared databases where everyone can read data. Turns out reading data from the blockchain is actually a difficult problem because there is so much data and fetching data is slow sometimes. That means now you have multiple services prop up that you can use to query data from the blockchain or write data to the blockchain, or they'll format data in a certain way for you. Then you have things like storage. Where does the media content of my NFTs actually live? Questions like those. Then you have things related to user experience. We often get customers who want their end users to be able to purchase things from them via a credit card. So just purchasing an NFT with a credit card. Sometimes folks want to cover the gas fees involved in performing any action, such as minting an NFT for their end users. All of these things are stuff that I think of as glue. They aren't significant enough to pair them at the same level as smart contracts, SDKs, and a dashboard. These things aren't primitives like that, but these are just pieces of glue that hold everything together. When you are trying to dip your toes into Web3 or go completely into Web3 with your product, your idea, your application that exists or not, you don't need to become a Web3 engineering shop or a crypto company yourself. The things between you, your product, and the blockchain, those are the things that are pretty much implementation details. And those are the things that thirdWeb strives to basically handle for you. So this is what I had on thirdWeb. This is what I had on Web3 and why both of them matter pretty much. Feel free to ask away any questions in the chat or later, but I'll hand it over to Patrick.
Right, Chris Shang, again, amazing presentation. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about Web3 and the potential implications that it has for everyone. Specifically having your data be accessed entirely by everyone. It's completely open. I'd like to also welcome Ryan Bluestone, who's a ventures analyst for us on our branded retail team, and is currently looking at a lot of Web3 applications and working with a lot of our partners there in order to help facilitate intros to Web3. We'd love to go ahead and get the conversation going. If you have any questions about thirdWeb or how this could potentially impact your business, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be happy to ask him. But we'd like to go ahead and kick things off, a little bit more of a personal question. You mentioned that you were studying philosophy and that you had a liberal arts background. I'd love to hear more about that journey and how you got into crypto specifically, and what inspired you to really take this leap. What was the thing that made you go, wow, okay, this is it, this is what I need to do?
Sure. 2 years ago, I was deep into a bachelor's degree in philosophy. College had turned me into the, regular emo kid. Government is bad, this is bad, this is bad, everything is bad. And then I was surfing the internet. Somehow I managed to find a Medium article written by Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum. He has a long history of writing long form stuff. Me being a philosophy major, I'm quick to engage in those things. So I read that article, realized, hold up, this is not someone telling me an old tale in a new way. This person is actually talking about technology in the face of politics, in the face of sociology, and all those kinds of things that I was into at that time. So I thought it's worth giving this a shot and reading into this more because it was truly something new and not something that had been implemented in the past. And he was rephrasing it in a new way. I dig into that Web3 rabbit hole, like everyone talks about. Eventually, there's this big idea that Web3 is trustless, it's permissionless. And I quickly realized if I truly want to sort of experience this idea that Web3 is trustless, I need to be able to read code. Otherwise, I'm trusting the developers. They can write whatever and market me whatever, and I'll be the fool by the end of the day. So I started learning how to read code. That naturally flows into learning how to write code because pretty equivalent skills. And then fast forward maybe a few weeks. This is all happening during COVID when I have so much free time, just me and my cats in my apartment. I do hackathon after hackathon. I lose all of them initially, of course. I slowly started racking up wins. The co-founder of thirdWeb, Farkan, he puts out a tweet saying he's looking for engineers. I cold DM him, and that's how I joined thirdWeb as employee number one. So that was the sort of journey to thirdWeb from a philosophy background, out of all things. Yeah.
I mean, hey, all good things should be, well, most things are, rooted and grounded in some form of philosophy or another. So yeah, it's incredibly good to know that you have that foundation as well. Speaking of your founders, would love to know a little bit more about them. What was their backgrounds, and then how long have they been working on thirdWeb? I know that they've received some rock star investors in the past, so they're absolutely killing it.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear a little bit more about that journey if you have any details.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the co-founders of thirdWeb are my biggest source of confidence in thirdWeb, right? We have two trailblazers over there. One is Stephen Bartlett, and the next is Farkan Raidan. Stephen, pioneer in the growth and marketing side of things. He IPO'd, I believe, Social Chain. And the numbers associated with social chains are always in the billions. So that's how I know he did big things there. And then you have Farkan. Farkan is a trailblazer in tech innovation. He is early to pretty much everything. He was early to Web3 as well. He has a great podcast episode on the My First Million podcast with Shan Puri, where they dig into his background and his journey to wherever he got. He led great companies prior to starting thirdWeb as well. And when you have two forces like these, it really gives a powerful feeling to people like me who are maybe working in the same company towards the same mission and whatnot. So that's the background on the founders. Have them on Plug and Play next time. It'd be incredible.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, you mentioned, that you're employee number one there. You and the co-founders kind of start pretty early on. What are some of the early challenges that you guys had to overcome diving into both the Web3 and startup space together?
So just like a lot of startups out there, maybe all the startups out there, thirdWeb didn't start out like it looks today. We had tens of ideas that we wanted to explore, largely because Web3 development for us at the time was new as well, right? Today I'm speaking a year and a half later from the time I joined the company. And today we're trying to solve the problem of development in the Web3 space. But if you rewind, all of that stuff was new to us as well. So our journey involved taking these tens of ideas and trying to take them to market one by one. And essentially what ended up happening was one by one, all of these ideas crumble. And you start realizing internal struggles as well, internal struggles relating to how we can develop good software for Web3 products, because developing good software is a hard problem. And that's kind of where thirdWeb was born out of. We tried to implement so many ideas in the Web3 space and realized thousands of other people are trying to implement these same ideas and are hitting the same problems. And everything seemed messy and everything seemed cluttered. That's when we decided to take a leap into actually trying to solve the entire problem space of development in Web3. My colleague has a great sort of great philosophy on tech. He says tech cycles usually work in aggregation and then separating things out. And at the time that, even now, not at the time that thirdWeb was starting to form, and even today, Web3 development is somewhat cluttered. You have great innovation happening in the corners of the space that no one finds out immediately. And perhaps now the tech cycle is about aggregating things. thirdWeb wants to be everything between your product and the blockchain. And that pretty much means every vertical that exists within there. So that's really where, those were the kinds of struggles that we had, but turned out to be beneficial because we ultimately created a product around them.
Totally makes sense. And what about your team allowed you guys to pivot so successfully?
Our team has members that have known each other from the past, and it also has members like me who are unorthodox entrants in the tech space, right? How often are you talking about founding engineers who study philosophy and whatnot? So it is the combination of the two. You have great chemistry amongst these team members who know each other from past startups that got acquired and whatnot. And then you have this sort of embrace of these wacky new entrants, these wacky characters that you do need to embrace if you like really want to dip your toes in the Web3 space. And everyone is so enthusiastic about this mission. Things like smart contract code is something that was so inaccessible at the time that we started, maybe a year and a half ago. It was something very jank. You had to piece things together from many different places to even try to deploy a single smart contract to the blockchain. And then recently, a month or so ago, we had a milestone of 100,000 smart contracts being deployed via thirdWeb. And that's the primary mission. It's even the smallest of creator to Fortune 500 companies being able to deploy the same piece of software, which is just a piece of software. It doesn't need to be anything glorious. Smart contracts are just software again. And we're trying to break down that barrier of letting people access that piece of software.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't agree with you more. Here at Plug and Play, like that's what we're mainly focusing on. That's who we're trying to get involved with and get into our programs and introduce to all of our corporate partners are those startups that are really lowering that barrier of entry to crypto. Because as you said, like, I mean, even for somebody who's codes and is an expert, it's still incredibly complicated. And a lot of the processes out there, you have to kind of mix and match and figure out what can work. And sometimes those become really janky solutions. And so thirdWeb is, I love the mission of what you guys are doing about allowing anyone who just wants to create and have an audience, no matter how big or small, and really facilitate those interactions and take advantage of this incredibly groundbreaking technology.
Yeah, I mean, if I can piggyback on what something you said there, of even how, even for like solid engineers, Web3 development is kind of scattered and difficult and so on and so forth. And two of our senior employees had their path towards thirdWeb in the way that you described, where they were dipping their toes into Web3 and they wanted to build a tiny Web3 project themselves. And then us as thirdWeb, we introduced them to solutions that are out of the box. And those solutions face immediate rejection, right? You have the engineer tendency of, hey, I can do this myself. This is not that easy, or I have fun figuring XYZ things out. And everyone goes through that cycle of saying that they can do everything themselves. And it is very hard to do everything yourself without actually turning into a whole Web3 engineering shop yourself. That was the path of two of our senior engineers into our team, which is do it yourself and then thinking why when these out-of-the-box solutions are there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's what we try to get our corporate partners all to agree on, and what we anyone who works with us really is on that same page as well. I mean, if you look back, like nobody's trying to build their own CRM platform anymore. You know, everyone's like, okay, yeah, we should probably just use Salesforce, use HubSpot, or one of the other major players. There's no need for us to hire out a whole team to develop that. And other people can do it just as well. So it's not part of our core offering. But beyond that, you mentioned that you're working with some of Fortune 500s. I would love to hear more about who you're partnered with, and then what are some of the projects that you're working on with them.
Sure. Maybe I can't mention names. I didn't even check whether I can mention names before coming on here, but I can give the general layout of what's happening, right? The primary product that a lot of the larger companies engaging with us are trying to push out are the basics, right? And it's funny to call it basics, but I think the space is moving so quickly that these things are now quote unquote basics. And so the basics is just a collection of NFTs that an audience can collect and reap any kind of reward out of it. So just like I talked about in the presentation there, the ethos of Web3 is different from Web2 in the way that in Web2, you had platforms being architected that can best be served by the users. It is beneficial for your website and that a user stays for a lot of time so that you can sell them something like an ad or whatnot. The ethos flips in Web3 where Web3 technology gives people the realization that money can be made across the board while giving the users a better experience than they get in Web2. And so now you have platforms being architected that can best serve the users because those are the platforms that will architect the users. We have seen this in DeFi. We have seen this all across Web3. Users flock where they reap rewards, and that's just human nature, right? So when it comes to larger companies working with us, it is generally NFT drops where their end users can collect these NFTs and have these NFTs as identifiers that, hey, we are a part of this collection. And now this works both ways. The user can now reap whatever rewards that are guaranteed to them on holding an NFT. And on the flip side, an NFT for a larger company is the ultimate email list, right? An email list not to emails, but to wallets with actual money that they can transact over very quickly. This is very powerful as a company to have. When you have 30,000 NFTs held by thousands of wallets, you now have access to 30,000 bank accounts, basically. So if you try to look at it in terms of benefit to the larger company itself, there you have it, the ultimate email list that you'd want to have.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. As far as like allowing you and creating like that content, not just around building up any sort of brand loyalty, but you also get their addresses, essentially, like their nameplates on their Web3. And as that goes forward and as more and more people have that, those are going to be incredibly valuable.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Super.
It's like that there are business benefits to Web3. It is not just about handing money away to the people. That's perhaps like the quick way of thinking about Web3. Oh, everyone's just airdropping gifts to everyone all the time. That's not really it. There are definitely other ways to think about things like an NFT collection where users are getting benefits. It is much more of a dynamic in Web3 where both the business and the consumer is benefiting compared to maybe previous models.
Super interesting. Thanks for sharing that perspective. So from our side, we've seen a ton of innovation in this space and a lot of new entrants popping up. What is the moat that you guys have, or what really differentiates you from the competitors?
I think the moat that we have is twofold. The first is, again, the founders and the team. When I initially joined thirdWeb, the main reason I joined thirdWeb was looking around at great products like Uniswap and so many great products out there already. And then I looked at the background of the team and the founders, and at the time, just the founders when I was joining. And I realized we might just be the team that knows how to build a product instead of a DApp. I think building a product requires much more than blockchain wizardry. It requires much more than mastery of software and what have you, right? So you see a lot of innovative things being pushed out in the Web3 space day in and day out. A lot of innovative protocols, a lot of complex protocols. These are difficult to understand, but they have a larger picture that is beneficial at the end of the day. Do all of these innovative things meet what I would call a product? Perhaps not. So that's one of the moats I feel we have is we are confident that we can build a great product. It is also why we went completely free. We started out by collecting a small fee here and there within the system of the contracts you deploy. And we quickly realized that in crypto land, in the Web3 space, copy pasting software is cheap. Replicating projects is very cheap. So when you have a marketplace or when you have any sort of smart contract with a fee at any place, for someone like me, it takes 10 minutes to remove that fees and redeploy that entire project somewhere. So fees in that sense is trending to zero. And rather than us trying to spend time thinking which places in the product are places where we can extract money out of our users, I think that gave us the freedom to think about, okay, here's all the things that our users are trying to do with Web3. How can we give them the best product experience? And you can see that effect all throughout any internal channels within a team as well, right? When a company goes completely free, you can see the engineering focus shift to building a great product. You can see the team shift, the marketing shift, the everything shift towards building a good product for the end user. So that being a great mode. And again, I'm repeating this the third time, but I have strong faith in our team. Our team is incredible and the founders are incredible. I hope you check out Farkan's podcast on My First Million. Pretty incredible stuff, and I'm sure you'll leave motivated and whatnot.
Yeah, no, that podcast is amazing. Anyone who hasn't seen it or heard about it, definitely go watch them. I haven't seen that particular episode of My First Million, so I'll need to add that to my list for sure. And you've been speaking a lot about users who are all using your platform. I'd love to hear more about what demographics make up that user base, and what have you seen the most adoption with, or quickest adoption with? What sort of communities?
I would say we've had a wide demographic of people trying to use thirdWeb, and we have a gigantic public Discord where people are throwing all these ideas out of what they want to do with thirdWeb. And for someone like me, peeking into our public Discord, it is absolutely sort of it's pretty crazy. The kinds of like ideas that people have and the kinds of things they're trying to do with Web3. In terms of specifics, maybe I can throw out a lot of demographics out there. There are independent creators and a lot of startup founders. Web3 is such a hot space. Everyone has a great idea to do with Web3, and they're trying to find the fastest way to get to production, right? And I feel like that's the reason why that's a gigantic demographic that got attracted to thirdWeb. It's because our messaging and our mission is always towards getting you to production as soon as possible or as fast as possible, or at least accelerating it. And that's what attracts startup founders. They want to move quickly and get their idea implemented and fail if it fails, and build upon it if they succeed. The next kind of demographic is, I would say, the previously mentioned larger companies who are trying to dip their toes into Web3. It is a big task for a legacy company or an already existent company in the Web2 space to now dip their toes into Web3 without having something like thirdWeb. And that's because an exploration into Web3 like that can usually mean the burden of hiring all kinds of engineers or all kinds of strategists and whatnot. In all the slides I showcased there, the three primitives I threw out were smart contracts, SDKs, and dashboards. All of our code is open source. And if you actually dig into our code, you'll realize that there are so many things to touch upon if you're trying to do these things by yourself, that this actually slows you down. If you don't have the space to figure out which tools are to your personal preference when building your software stack in your company, that whole process of exploration takes a ton of time. And within that process, you generally don't have a lot of certainty on whether you've made the right choices or not. We faced that early on in our company as well, when we were trying all the tens of ideas that we had before this thirdWeb idea. And it's that you pick a few pieces of Web3 development tools, you try to piece them together, and it is always uncertain about whether my actual software is going to perform well enough to handle a lot of users. These are basic questions that you shouldn't even be thinking about when you're building a product. Your focus should be building out a good product and not reinventing crypto infrastructure for your own internal team. And I feel like that second half of reinventing basically all this crypto infrastructure that exists out there, that's the part that we're trying to eliminate from the workflow of all these people trying to do something with Web3. How I think of it is you come to thirdWeb with an idea, and you should be able to do it on the dashboard within 2 minutes. Otherwise, we're not building a good product out there.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. With you there. Let's see. So to transition it again a little bit away from user bases and more on the corporations and the use case side. I mean, you're obviously an expert in digital communities and SDKs for Web3. And so what use cases do you see for crypto? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier for corporations beyond just crypto as an asset class, and what business units inside of those corporations should begin to get introduced to technologies like yours and should start experimenting? Where should the innovation teams that are here listening today really point their teams at? Like, who should they introduce you to essentially?
Perfect. I think my favorite part about that question there is I will never be able to tell you the ideas that are going to come out of you. And the great part about our thirdWeb product is it will take you 5 minutes to go on the thirdWeb dashboard and publish NFTs in a test network or something. Throughout all the customer conversations I've had, I see two phases. Generally, it's the first phase is usually inbound, or the first meeting with the customer, and they have preconceptions and ideas about what they want to implement on Web3, or do with Web3 things out there. And we have a great discussion, and we discuss their ideas, and everything goes well. Then there's a split phase where they actually go on the dashboard and try just publishing one NFT on a test network, something super simple that you can do in 2 minutes. And then comes the second phase where these preconceptions of how difficult is some project going to be, or how much time is a project going to take, what are the pieces that are involved in the kind of project that you want to build. These incorrect preconceptions sort of start to fade away once you actually hit reality and you're like, okay, I can see what's happening on a dashboard easily. Let me call up my engineering team and hook them up with an SDK so they can start implementing these things at the application level. So in terms of the kind of folks that should be exploring, I would say if anyone is Web3 curious, business related or personal related, just try it out. It would be almost dishonest for me to give ideas out here. There are some basic things that I can throw out there, like an NFT drop, or for purposes like marketing, or even the ultimate email list business benefits that I talked about before. There are things like revenue sharing contracts, which you can compose with NFT drops if you want to do innovative things like creator guilds or collectives who publish pieces together. You can run your own OpenSea using thirdWeb. We have a marketplace contract where you can restrict what assets can be transacted over, and now you build an in-house marketplace properly integrated within your application, and now you control all of your distribution. So there are all these ideas related to whatever we offer on thirdWeb. You can find them on portal.thirdweb.com. But in terms of what idea you are going to come up with, I would love to hear from you. Async, in the chat, whatever. Yeah.
Totally. And I mean, continuing on with that. So you mentioned that customer base that comes to you and knows what they want to do. A lot of corporations are interested in diving into Web3, but they don't exactly know where to start or what's going to have the largest benefit on their business. Do you help walk them through your various products and the benefits that'll have to them, or what process do you offer those types of customers?
Perfect. So this type of customer you described is pretty much all of our customers, right? Everyone has an unclear picture of how things are going to go. And as the people building thirdWeb, we have to be aware of this fact. Anyone in the audience, if you would like a proper walkthrough, I will write out an email in the chat, and feel free to message that email. We have an excellent business development team. We have an excellent customer solutions team. Maybe you will hop on a call with me also. And we properly walk you through using the website, using SDKs if you are more developer technical focused, even building out your own smart contracts. What we've realized is increasingly as the market at least experiences a few cycles with these new sexy hot primitives like NFTs out there, people start to have ideas that cannot be fit into templates, right? You had people with ideas that could be fit into templates. All of these PFP projects, profile picture projects related to NFTs, are things that you can fit into a template. And that kind of template is, for example, the NFT drop contract on thirdWeb. But now you have people increasingly having custom ideas because the space has been through a few cycles with these new hot primitives in the market out there. And so for those, we have even a smart contracts SDK that you can use to develop custom experiences for yourself by writing your own smart contract and deploying them without any security issues that you'd face before what we created. So in terms of us walking people through the entire process, we do walk people through at the beginning, and then we have a public Discord, and I'll give you a peek into our internal process out here. Our public Discord has several private channels for each customer that we walk through our stack, basically. And each private channel is something that our entire team views and helps you out in whenever you hit any roadblock when trying to use our SDK or our website, or you have any larger strategic question about what you'd like to do at a high level. These are all things that we're super willing to help you with. It's mainly because we understand that there is not much clarity on these things out there. And sharing this kind of knowledge is only beneficial to us. It's only beneficial to everyone. We also try to rack up on our async sort of written text documentation. It's funny that that's out of fashion now, but we have text documentation. I'll type in a link for that as well. If you'd like to see how the sausage is made, you can check out those docs.
Thanks. Amazing. Yeah. I want to be mindful of time. I know we're coming up. I think we have around 10 minutes left. So we have time for a couple more questions. I know, like, regarding mass adoption, your company is doing all that they can to eliminate hurdles and allow, again, everyone to engage in crypto, which I think is terrific. And I think it's the absolute right approach, like to bring it back to Web 2. That's what YouTube did. They didn't try to make their own content. They gave a platform for everyone else to do it. Right. And then when you look even further back, right, look to the gold rush out in California in the 1800s. It's not that the people who got rich weren't the people digging for gold, it was the people selling them the tools. So I think that that's what you guys are essentially doing for Web3. And I would love to know what you see as the future of thirdWeb, and how do you see yourself developing the company? Where would you like to grow into? And how are you going to continue to eliminate those hurdles and those barriers of entry for non-crypto natives?
Perfect. So where do I see thirdWeb going? We want thirdWeb to be the Web3 app development framework. Any idea that you are trying to implement, and if it has something to do with Web3, your default option should be thirdWeb. So that's where we're headed. In terms of mass adoption, we have this great analogy that we internally share around all the time. If people have played Super Mario, they'll get it immediately. In Super Mario, you're jumping around, you're trying to beat the stage. Then you find a fire flower, and now you can start shooting fireballs, right? What's important to secure mass adoption in Web3 is not to teach people how the fire flower works and what it is composed of. What's important is you tell people, hey, now you can shoot fireballs. This is the power, this is the superpower that you're going to get with all these Web3 things that we're trying to push to you. This goes back to the question about thirdWeb's moat of us being able to build a product. I think a lot of folks in the space get stuck on explaining how the sausage is made. There are complex systems that people create and are justifiably very excited about and want to explain to the world that this is how we achieved this end state and this is how we achieved this complex product or system that we've created. That is excellent in the case of people who are interested in learning about those things. But when we talk about mass adoption, we're not talking about necessarily that level of enthusiasm. At that point, what we're talking about is my mom who can come on my app, use it, and have some useful thing that she can take out of it. What she would care about is the superpower she's going to get from using my app versus her son boring her about smart contract technology and whatnot. So I feel like in terms of gaining mass adoption, the best thing everyone can do is publicize all the superpowers that people are going to get with Web3 things. To me, that comes down to a person being truly able to express consent, a person truly being able to express their preference, and exercising their freedoms, and especially financial freedoms. That's the kind of thing that the architecture of Web3 enables. When you have a global shared database where people are marking data as truly their own, you can now start expressing things truly, basically. So that's the message to convey, I feel, to gain mass adoption.
Awesome. Ryan, you got any last words?
I mean, one last question here, just to wrap things up and really looking future forward. Would love to know, Krishang, where do you see Web3 going in the future? What's next?
I'd be lying to you if I said I do know. I can maybe talk to the scenarios in which it might fail, right? If I feel like there are two scenarios in which Web3 fails. One scenario is physical violence and the other is regulatory violence. Anybody capable of either of those two types of violences, if they feel that, if they are not aligned with the vision with which people in the Web3 space are building out the infrastructure for Web3, then things can start going south. And I feel like for us as proponents of Web3, it is important to express that our vision is actually beneficial for everyone involved out here. And that message sometimes gets drowned out when you see large market crashes, when you see a token go from whatever price to zero in like a day or something like that. It is very understandable that like the noble message of Web3 gets drowned out because of these things. But then what matters is us doing a panel right after a market crash like this, and then being like, hey, it's not all going to zero. And not all of it is about it going up or down. What matters is we have a new way to organize the web, and developers and non-developers trying to architect how this new web is going to look like. The main benefit of this new web is that it's giving power to the people, power to the users, and that's the part that we truly care about when it comes to Web3. Everyone can make money and be happy, and that's all fine and dandy. But when it comes down to why we're developing Web3, the main vision is creating a web that gives power to the people and conveying that to bodies capable of physical violence or regulatory violence is pretty important to at least see this Web3 thing continue and not die out a decade into the process.
Absolutely. Well, Krishan, I can't think of a better way to end it than with that philosophical push-off. I think that you're absolutely right. I'm excited to see what you do. You are an incredibly intelligent individual, and we can't thank you enough for coming out. We'll be back out for NFT NYC later in June. Would love to meet up with you and anyone else here as well that's joining us today that's also based in New York or happens to be in town. We'd love to meet up with you. If you'd like to meet with Rakesh or Krishan, he has his email in the chat, so feel free to get it there as well. If you didn't get it from there or aren't able to do it today, or we're thinking a couple of days you'd like to get an invite to him, just let me know and I'll be more than happy to make that introduction. Ryan, Krishan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. From that on, please answer on the poll if you have any sort of inputs for what we've got going on there. And then,
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. That should wrap up today's conversation. I will give everybody their extra minute back. So again, thank you all for attending. We'll see you next month.